And on this Sunday, this very special Sunday that we call Palm Sunday, there is a traditional story that is told. And what I'd like you to do right now is to know that when we tell a story like this, and we read that story from the Bible, we usually take this in a very literal way. So I'm going to ask you to put on your metaphysical hats, because we're going to look at this literally and metaphysically. Because this is not only the story of the journey that Jesus took, but it's our journey too. Jesus also had a mission, and we have one too. So this journey then begins walking. That's what the people did. And they walked through, Jesus and his companions walked through the city called Jericho. And Jericho represents the physicalness of us. It represents our intellect. And we've all been there. We've all been to Jericho. We have all been to that place where we think, well, I can do this alone. I'm a real strong person. I don't need anybody. I don't need anything. I certainly don't need spirituality. I'll just do this by myself. And we have found out on many occasions it doesn't work too well. We read in the Bible that it says Jesus passed through Jericho. Well, that's what we need to do too. Pass through it. Because we're on a road to something higher, something better. We're on the road to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem means the habitation of peace. Isn't that what we all want? It has been called the Golden City. Well, I think that living in a state of peace is a golden way to live. We also notice now that Jesus isn't walking anymore. He's riding. For the last few hundred yards, he gets on a colt of a donkey. And we think, how strange. Why wasn't there a big parade? He's making a statement. In riding on that colt of a donkey as a very humble person, he is saying the inner life is what is important. If the outer life, the outer world had been important to him, he would have had a grand parade. He would have ridden on a beautiful white horse, all decked out in finery, and he would have been the same. Beautiful robes. But that isn't the way it was. And so we see then that he represents something to us. He is the Christ. He is that Spirit within us. And the colt represents our physical nature. Wonderful as it is, it needs discipline. When you think of our five senses and what they allow us to do in this world, how beautiful they are, they certainly do need discipline. Because with all our desires and our appetites, if we allow our physical nature to have control, then we become mere slaves to that physical nature. So we have to let the Christ of us be in dominion. And that's why Jesus is riding on that donkey. What a beautiful message. Now, usually, the story ends about here for Palm Sunday. We see the palms and the people, they're shouting and waving, and it's beautiful. But it's not going to end for us here, because there is the rest of the story, and we want to hear what that is. My title today is Cleansing the Temple. Well, that's exactly what Jesus went to do. You see, if we are to become masters of living, and I think that's exactly what Jesus meant in his messages to us, that we give dominion to our Christ Spirit, then we become masters of living. But there are things that we have to do. And in cleansing the temple, he showed us again things that we must do. So he goes into the temple and he sees in this outer courtyard that there is much confusion. This is the court of the Gentiles. And in this court, the Gentiles are allowed, the converted ones, to be in this part of the temple. But in this part, there are also oxen and sheep and doves in stalls. They are going to be sold so that these can be the animals of sacrifice. And so then in this courtyard, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of shouting and people bargaining. There are money tables there, and money has to be exchanged. I don't know, maybe there was even shouting about that. But the value of the animals was always being discussed, and were they getting a fair bargain? And much arguing and loud noise. The atmosphere of this place was anything but reverent. Now, Jesus had undoubtedly seen this many, many times in his life. But on this day, suddenly it wasn't an inward objection anymore. Now he took action. He had done it once before. At the beginning of his ministry, he cleansed the temple. Now, toward the end, he's doing it again. And so he cast out the oxen and the sheep and the doves. He overthrew the money-changing tables. And he said, this temple is to be a house of prayer, not a den of robbers. In other words, he's saying this is a sacred place, that you are to keep this place sacred. Instead, what have you done? You have made this a place of intolerance and of merchandising. You have taken this sacred place and have given it away to the world. Remember your metaphysical hat now, because we ask ourselves, what is the temple? What is the temple to you and to me? Isn't it our body? Isn't it our mind? We know that we can't separate body and mind anymore. That is a connection. In the 3rd chapter of Corinthians, it says, do you not know that you are God's temple, and the Spirit of the living God dwells within you? Don't you know that? And that's just one of the places in the Bible that tells us that God's Spirit does indwell us. So this body, this mind that we have, they are sacred. Is that how we look at them? Oftentimes, no. Somehow there's a picture in my mind of children, and they're sitting at these video games and doing these things and sitting in front of the television, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm off on a tangent now, don't let me go there. On my soapbox. Because we are filling their minds with all sorts of things that are not sacred, that are not good for them. Our minds are sacred. Our bodies are sacred. What do we put into these bodies? Do we ever think about that? This is God's temple. What if people could walk through your mind right now? What if they could walk through my mind? Would it be a safe place to be? What would they find there? Would they find love, or would they find judgment? Would they find acceptance or no? What would they find? Would they find that we are this person who has given the ways of the world to our soul? Yes, there has to be a balance in our lives, of course. But would we find that in this place, that people would see that we have accepted the beliefs of others, that we don't stand in harsh judgment? What would they find? An interesting thing to ask yourself. An interesting thing to take into your week and just say, what is in my mind? How sacred is it? How much division is there? In the days of Jesus, in his life, there were tribal boundaries. And so there were the people then who were pure and the ones who were impure. There were the clean and the unclean. We still do that today. In our religious way of thinking, there are those who are worthy and those who are not. There are those who are saved and those who are lost. There are those who are right and those who are wrong. Haven't we learned anything from what Jesus told us? His teachings of love, haven't we learned? You see, when we hold up our version of God and we say, this is absolute truth, and we make ourselves right and everybody else wrong, then what we have done is build a defensive wall around ourselves. And we sit within that wall so smug, so self-righteous. But I ask you, where's the joy in that? Where is the love in that? And that defensive wall we have built around our own feelings of insecurity. If we really knew who we are, we wouldn't even have that wall in the first place. But putting that wall up, in so doing that, we have cut ourselves off from wholeness and oneness and love. That was not what Jesus told us. Jesus was a boundary breaker. You know, I just realized that as I keep reading stories about him and reading the Bible and what he said. He invited us all to come into a place of wholeness and love. He invited us to become the new humanity. And if we are to become the new humanity, it means that we need to change our thinking. There needs to be a shift in our perception of how we view people, how we view other people's beliefs. There needs to be this shift where we move from being right to being kind, where we move from this idea of judgment to live and let live. When we move from hatred to acceptance, when we move from holier than thou to know that we are all in this together, and when we move from unforgiveness to forgiveness. And I truly think that's the big one. See, this is cleansing the temple, and nothing does it better than forgiveness. And what does it mean to forgive? It means to pardon. It's an acquittal, and it means to release. So the first one that I have to begin with, and you have to begin with, is yourself. To pardon yourself. To release yourself from all the past mistakes you have made. That's not easy. Because those mistakes keep coming up in our minds. And it's like rattling skeletons in our mind temple. They don't belong there. They're dead. They're gone. That's all over. And all the rattling of skeletons does is stir up all the guilt and the shame and all the insecure feelings. We don't need that. See, it's not important what you have been. What is important in this life is what you are becoming, what you are reaching for, and what you believe yourself to be. What do you believe yourself to be? What are you? I am
the light of the world.
The light of the world. Thank you. Okay, how many have it on their mirror now? I'm going to keep asking this until every hand goes up. I am the light of the world. The Master told us that. Now, it's not enough to know that. Now we have to become that light that we already are. And we also have to let go then of everything that is not of the light. I call that forgiveness. I call that a pardon. I call that a release. To let go. When you think of all the havoc and the pain that unforgiveness has caused in this world, I invite you to think maybe of your own family. Hopefully your family is not ones that I hear about, that there's a rift in a family and it divides them sometimes to the grave. When a simple act of forgiveness over, sometimes these things are so silly. I could think of one right now. It's just so silly. It's hard to believe that people would get in a conundrum about such a foolish thing, but they do. This is family. And a simple act of forgiveness would bring the joy and the harmony back into the family circle. I see friends sometimes through a misunderstanding or something that has happened between them. And somehow all that lovely friendship is gone. And a simple act of forgiveness could bring it all back again. All we have to do is look out in the world and see what a beautiful thing forgiveness is. I'd say it's 3 little words. And it begins with us, with me, with you. I forgive you. Could you actually go to the mirror today and say, I forgive you? Could you do that? Say your name too. Audrey, I forgive you. And then the 3 little words, I forgive others. For all the mistakes that they have made. People come into our path and they stumble and they fall. Is it our right or our whatever, things that we do or don't do, but do we just berate them and condemn them because that happened? No. You see, what happens when we forgive is that we are reclaiming our power to choose our freedom. To choose our freedom. And it doesn't make any difference if that person deserves our forgiveness or not. Because it's you that deserves the freedom. You deserve to be free. That's the most beautiful gift you can give to yourself, is freedom. There are many tough things that we go through in this life, but what I know and what this story tells me is that forgiveness is one of the toughest. But with Spirit, it doesn't have to be. It can be a very simple, easy thing. Try it. I guarantee with Spirit, it works. It does. And then we look back on all these things that we have gone through, and we say, I think that was a blessing. Because it took me to a higher place. And on this Palm Sunday, we could say it's taken us to Jerusalem. It's taken us to the place of peace. And then the palm branches are laid out for us too. Because they are symbols of accomplishment reserved for conquerors. When we forgive, we are truly conquerors. We are masters of living. And we have washed our temple clean. I got a CD in the mail. I'm going to close with this. Remember when Brother Timothy was here? Loved him. And he said, if you sign up for my CD and pay me, I'll send it to you in the mail. Well, I just got it the other day. I couldn't wait to listen to it. Now, imagine my surprise when number 10 on the CD, if you have it. Anybody have it? Yeah, a few of us have it. I hope we get them for sale in the bookstore. They're really great. And number 10 is all about the Golden City. It's wonderful. It's kind of a toe-tapping thing, too, you know. My mama and my papa, they told me one thing, to build the golden city. And they showed me the fount that where compassion springs. They showed me the fount where compassion springs, where hope is the hammer and love is the nail, in this golden city, where the hills of my heart meet the hills of yours. But hey, dry bones, rise up. We can't do this thing alone. But brick by brick and stone by stone and little by little, we are coming to that place where we call home, the golden city, where the hills of my heart meet the hills of yours. Doesn't that sound like Namaste? It does, doesn't it? Where the divine hills of my heart greet and honor the divine hills of your heart. Namaste.